Well, hello and welcome to Young Black and in Business with myself, Anelisa Tuswa. This is officially our first episode. I think the first episode that I went live with is the introductory episode, but this one is your first interview. It's going to be slightly different because I am not profiling yet a young Black-owned business or a business owned by a young Black person. I am starting up with somebody that I think is quite fitting for this conversation. He is not only the CEO of the NYDA, but you're an economist. And I think that is such an important entry into this conversation because I want us to start about the role of young people in the economy, and then we can talk about the NYDA. So help me welcome Ndumiso Kubheka-Hadebe. He is the new CEO of the NYDA. Do you get used to it?
Well, it's still taking time. It's still taking some time.
New CEO of the NYDA, and he's also a good economist. And
Thank
also,
you.
I mean, you ran your own business at some stage, hey, if I'm correct.
Yes, I've been in business longer than I have been employed.
You see, that means you actually fit the profile of the people that I'm actually.
I'm glad. I'm glad.
Ndumiso, welcome to Young Black and in Business.
Thank you, Somnoto. It's great to be here.
I think maybe let's start with the state of the South African economy and how we can rebuild this economy with young people leading that growth.
I think that there's a lot of opportunity for the South African economy to grow, and of course for the role of young people. Of course, we all know that the average age of a South African is around 28 years old.
Yep.
So we're predominantly young. And there are areas that I think perhaps if we focus more closely on can provide not only opportunities for employment, but also for just entrepreneurial growth for young people. For example, when we look at the sector of agriculture as an industry, when you look at the average age in that particular sector, it's above 55 years old. So to me, it says what is happening with the pipeline of young people who are emerging farmers who will address our food security concerns and so forth. So I think there's significant opportunity for young people to play in the growth of the South African economy.
Then where does the NYDA fit in this? Because, I mean, currently we're talking about growth, we're talking about young people, and I do know that you guys have quite a big mandate as well.
We do have a big mandate. and that mandate is, so the National Youth Development Agency is an agency that falls under the Department of Youth, Women and Persons Living with Disabilities. And the mandate of the agency is to coordinate and mainstream youth development across all sectors of the South African economy.
Sure.
So that's a big and broad mandate.
That's a very broad one.
And of course, given the fiscal constraints that we're in, we have a budget of just over R1 billion to be able to do all of this work. Which is certainly
quite small.
It's very small.
And your mandate is across all industries.
Yes, to really mainstream youth development across all sectors and industries. So I think it therefore says how we use the limited resources that we have we need to use very strategic and special ways in which we coordinate that mandate. And so partnerships become a very important part of doing so, tapping into the partnerships within the public sector itself, in the private sector as well, both financial and non-financial resources, and also civic society. And so I think that's where also what is called then the integrated youth development strategy is located in, to really bring in all of these partners in order to better coordinate.
You're touching on my next point, because I was going to ask on what your vision looks like when it comes to youth development. You're a young person yourself. You've been in business. You're also an economist. So surely, I mean, no offense to the NYDA, but I think over the last few years, we have not seen them. We have, as young people on the ground, we still trying to figure out what was their strategy. So I'm quite keen to hear what your strategy as a person that just got into office a couple of months ago. And yeah, I think that's what I'm where I was going with the question.
Yeah, I think you're quite correct, Annelise. I think it's a very common and valid critique of the agency from a visibility point of view. Often young people, and I think even in Parliament, it's often raised to say, look, we don't see or feel the agency, be it in rural areas or in semi-urban or urban areas.
Even us people in urban areas, hey?
Yeah, so it's a big challenge that needs to be addressed, and so that's why part of the vision is to really leverage strategic partnerships in order to amplify what people hear about the NYDA, what young people see about the NYDA, and what people experience regarding the NYDA. Given what I've mentioned, the fiscal constraints that we operate in, I think that becomes quite important. And the key part is to ensure that there's inclusiveness of young people in the South African economy. And there's also the visibility of the NYDA in terms of all sectors of the economy. And so that's why the question of partnerships becomes important. And maybe as an economist, the rationalization is, there's a well-known economist whose surname is Pareto. And in economics, we have what we call the Pareto principle, which basically talks about what are the 20% of things that you can do that can drive and deliver on 80% of the outcomes that you're looking to achieve. So really zooming in on the small impactful work that can really drive an impact on the outcomes that you want to deliver. And I think for the agency, given the constrained fiscal resources, that's the kind of thinking that we will need to deploy, given the coordination mandate that we have. And so strategic partnerships is one of those areas, or one of those 20% of things that can enable that. I mean, the presidency at some point had advised that within government as a whole, there's over around 50 billion rand that is available for youth development activities. The question is that the coordination mandate of the agency, how do we then begin to meaningfully tap into those resources in a way that can shift the needle at a macroeconomic level where youth unemployment is concerned?
I mean, we know where unemployment is in this country, and a lot of young people are seeing, I want to say they're using entrepreneurship as a way to actually keep themselves active in the economy, but also create more jobs. So now we need to get into the practicality. I'm a young person. I am starting this journey as a business owner or as an entrepreneur. What are the channels and how do I get a hold or gain access to the NYDA?
So over the years, the NYDA has moved from simply going to the branch and, whether it's you would want grant funding for being able to purchase specific equipment for you to work, or you would need assistance with the purchasing of software for if you're in the services space. So traditionally it was branch informed. And I think similar with the banks as well, mainly via branches. But now, given the increased digitization and young people also being online, and of course we'll discuss there as well regarding urban and rural.
Yeah, I actually get into that.
Yeah, which is a big one.
Yeah.
We're working currently in this quarter on a rural development strategy together with a disability strategy. But what the agency has since developed an ERP system that is also young people are able to apply for whatever services that they need, be it grant funding, business management training, voucher programs in terms of job support, mentorship, how to draft your CV, getting interviews and so forth online from their phones. And then you're able to go through that process in order for you to finally get the kind of service that you would require from the NYDA. So it's both at a branch level and as well through the ERP system, NYDA@erp.gov.za.
I will try and include that on the caption as well.
Please do. You can access that. And also the social media platforms. We have an omni-channel, be it on WhatsApp and also the social media platforms on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter as well. So young people are able to access, the services of the NYDA through those channels.
I want to play devil's advocate right now because not every young black people, yes, but young person in this country, mostly young black people, not all of them are in urban areas. Not all of them are in the digital space. We have to be quite inclusive in our conversations because, I'd love the fact that somebody who's probably watching me on YouTube so they do have a bit of internet. But how do then the people who are somewhere Mthatha, in the rural Transkei, or somewhere in the KZN, or somewhere in Limpopo, how do you guys reach those young people who have dreams? And I mean, I think their dreams are quite valid as well.
They're extremely valid.
Yeah.
So right now, there are outreach programs that the agency conducts in terms of rural communities in order for young people in rural areas to be able to access the services of the agency. However, this is a challenge that the agency currently has to actually expand that kind of work in terms of reaching young people in rural areas. So again, strategic partnerships being a thing, having conversations with the provincial governments around availing what we would call mobile offices, which are really, is it Ivecos of sorts, which is an
English in Balekele.
Iveco, those ones.
Okay,
yeah.
Yes, I see.
But in the format of a mobile office that has its own internet access and so forth. And part of what the board is driving is to say, look, let's set a day, for instance, every young person in the country should know, particularly in rural areas, that there's a Panda Thursday, and in your rural area, be it at a level of the district or the municipality, you will find that NYDA, mobile vehicle available for you to access whatever service that you might need. And so that's one of the ways to balance the limitations we have fiscally, but also ensure that young people know when to access services, at least on a specific day, as we try to lobby and advocate for more resources and so forth going forward. And so that's one of the ways in which we're working on ensuring that young people in rural areas are able to access those services. I was in Msinga just last week, and it's difficult in Makaya. So I think that kind of mobile office will play a big role in mitigating that.
I want us to shift things a little outside policy work, but also on the entrepreneur side of things, right? From your perspective, what does meaningful support look like when we think of supporting young people? What does meaningful and real support look like?
I think as well, meaningful support, and coming from business myself and having started in business at a relatively younger age, is the kind of support that is willing to take bets on young people. And taking bets to the extent of saying, we believe in the human capacity of young people in whichever area that they're playing in. And we're able to, one, either sponsor them in being able to say, look, provide an opportunity for young people, be it in a career or be it in business opportunities, or two, providing the kind of funding that can be catalytic in a way that can improve their upward social mobility. And part of that, I think, in the environment that we're in the youth development space, from a funding point of view, where entrepreneurs are concerned, is to think around, oftentimes when investors are looking at investable opportunities or businesses, the question, and quite correctly, of risk comes in. To say, look, it's a bit high risk for my appetite. Maybe you can look at the VC space and so on. You go to the VC space, you hear another conversation around that. It's a never-ending conversation. I mean, we myself and my former business partners come from that space. And so the question is to say, given the positioning of the National Youth Development Agency, how do we then de-risk the view that is associated with young entrepreneurs in South Africa? How do we leverage at an operational level, the business management training that is there? Oftentimes it's, as an entrepreneur, do you know your numbers? Are your governance processes in place? Do you have compliance that is also in place? How are you managing risk where your processes are concerned? So from a skills and business management training point of view, how are we de-risking that and preparing them for the pipeline of greater funding? Secondly, how do we use our own grant funding as a concessional mechanism, as part of a blended financing opportunity for other investors who might just be interested in debt or equity? But perhaps how do we then allocate, from an allocation point of view, say, let's allocate this amount to support, a blended financing mechanism for entrepreneurs who want to drive, catalytic investments and so forth. So that's the kind of thinking that I think provides meaningful support, and the kind of support that I think, if done at the right scale, can have a macro effect, which is really the numbers that we want to see change. Yeah.
I mean, I think you've actually asked my de-risking question, because I was going to ask you that there's an assumption that it's not an assumption that investing in young people is quite especially in young ideas, because every second yet nasinama ideas, but I think you've touched on it actually.
Yeah.
But beyond the program, representation matters. Beyond the programs that you guys have, representation matters. So how is the NYDA ensuring that young people themselves have a voice in shaping policies?
One of the key ways in which we are undertaking now in this quarter is what is called the consultation process in relation to the redevelopment of the integrated youth development strategy. So it concludes in this year of 2025. Okay. And there's a new strategy from 2026 going into 2030 that needs to be developed. Part of that process are nationwide consultations with all youth structures in business, civic society, politics, government, and so forth, to speak to the various elements of that particular strategy, be it in the areas of entrepreneurship, be it in the areas of jobs, be it in the areas of values and building social cohesion. And so it's a big exercise that we're undertaking so as to ensure that the inclusivity of those views are consolidated in a way that that is representative of young people, and that can be tabled to then cabinet for consideration.
I'm happy I asked this question, because I think one of the biggest challenges that we've had is we've got people who are supposed to be representing young people who aren't really young. So the young voices don't really get into the right conversations. That's why you'll find some of the things that government says sometimes they're just off. But anyway, I'm happy to hear. You can tell that there was no consultation with young people on the ground. But I'm happy to hear that there is something that's been done. Indeed. And to include young people in the conversation.
100%. And in addition to young people, young women in particular, because we are evidence-led in our thinking. When we look at the statistics from the Statistical Authority, we find that young Black women are always on the back foot of everything, of the economic ladder, social ladder, and so forth. So even in the bias that we have and the targets that we have, it's focused particularly on young women. And that's part of the vision of this current board as well, to ensure that that bias is there in the targets that are being set. Third is oftentimes young people who live with disabilities that, again, oftentimes it's almost as a by the way. And at this point in this current board in the agency, it's at the center of the inclusion agenda, to the extent that the board has actually established a governance committee focusing on inclusion, focusing on those specific areas, so that we report specifically on how we are performing and how we are meaningfully coordinating issues around those areas. Because without making sure that those voices are heard and inclusion happens at that level, then there will continue to be limitations in terms of the impact.
Sure. I mean, I've got so many questions that I want to ask, but I think we are running out of time.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
I've already done 9 interviews with young business owners.
Sure.
Right? But I want to put it to you, actually, as somebody that is now at the NYDA, what would you say are some of the challenges that young people in business deal with? I'm quite curious to hear from your side.
Yeah. I think that there are quite a couple in the South African environment.
Yeah.
The first is the common one, the F word. So that is common. And I don't think there's sufficient capital that has a risk orientation in the South African environment. And so that's why the de-risking component is part of a response to address that, so that it's no longer a conversation. Second, I think, is not just access to market, but I think the nature of the South African economy in a number of industries is very concentrated. In economic terms, we would say oligopolistic, meaning there are very few players, at max probably 5 players that are dominant that have market share in that industry. And the challenge that I think that young people have is to say, in light of the bigger players, say in the retail space that are in that environment, how do they begin to innovate around tapping into markets that the bigger players aren't necessarily able to, in a way that maybe because I understand young people and the needs and the interests of young people, I can market a particular product or service in a way that can, reach them. And so I think those are some of the two areas. The one around the concentration of industries is more of a structural one, and I think it's now at the level of the NYDA, and how do we lobby and advocate for markets that are more fair and open and transparent.
Just in closing, right? Building a business in South Africa is difficult.
Yeah.
I am somewhere in Port Elizabeth, Kubheka, or I am in Limpopo, I'm in Cape Town, Khayelitsha. What advice would you give a young entrepreneur yourself? Like yourself, one, I think, again, taking into consideration your expertise that you're an economist and you've been in business for a very long time, but now you're at the NYDA. It's a mouthful question, but I just want us to take those three things into consideration when you give that advice.
So I think trying to take all of those three things, at a first level, it's really assessing the needs in the environment that I'm operating in.
Yeah.
And also being, as I've learned with ideas that have not worked before, trying to be objective with how I understand the needs in my environment.
Yeah.
And so part of that is not only to ask the right questions with from potential customers or clients that you'd like to have engagements with, to gain insight as to what exactly that they need, be it in the services space or be it in the retail space, in whichever environment that you're operating in, but establishing an objective reality of what the needs are, I think then informs the route to market.
Okay.
So I think those two steps becomes quite important. Then when those two steps are figured out, I think everything else follows. And I think that's where the creativity and the innovation comes. Who can I talk to? How can I leverage better marketing channels in order to optimize my reach? And of course, you know that and do it exceptionally well. So you can perhaps provide a masterclass to some of us, how to get there, and scale up that audience,
That is a lot.
Yeah. But I think those two inputs are crucial. Everything else, in my view, follows after that.
I think we've covered our grounds. Is there anything that you think you'd like to add before I wrap up?
Look, I think the NYDA has a bold vision around the work that it seeks to do, and a part of that bold vision, as I would have highlighted, is around driving greater inclusiveness in the South African economy and across South African society broadly. We are big on partnerships. So this is really a call to action for all actors, particularly young people who would want to partner with the agency, leverage the pathways and the networks that the agency has across government and the private sector, and of course across internationally as well, in order to facilitate pathways for their own development. So I think those are some of the areas that we would certainly like to communicate and drive as a call to action. And of course, to the market as well, to say, look, we are also open in leveraging the limited resources that we have.
When you told me the budget, I was like,
the limited resources that we have to scale up, the work of youth development. Because ultimately, in closing, the question that we are addressing around youth unemployment, in our view, is a macroeconomic issue, and therefore requires a well-coordinated macroeconomic response. So we look forward to partnering on that level.
You know what? I'll be in touch.
Please do. Please do. Please do.
Ndumiso, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Annalisa, for having me.
Well, that was Ndumiso Kubheka-Kubheka or Kubheka-Hadebe.
Yes.
Okay. The CEO of the NYDA joining us on Young Black and in Business. Remember, this is more than a podcast. This is our business directory where you find your people. Until next time, please do like, share, subscribe, and remember to follow us on Young Black and in Business on Instagram, on YouTube and Spotify.